Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vashvashvari Mata ki jai. We'll go ahead now with chapter 23 from the Devi Bhagavatam Retold by Ramesh Menon. The news that Chikasura and Tamra were slain struck Mahisha like an astra. Tears welled in his eyes, and he sat plumped in silence on his throne. Then he sent Asiloma and Vilaka, two of his wisest asuras, laden with all sorts of treasures to the Devi. Asiloma was a monstrous Danava, but blessed with a serene manner. He said peacefully to the goddess, Devi, tell us why you want war with Mahisa. He means you no harm. Indeed, he sends you a treasure of precious gifts to show his sincerity. We have come to make peace with you, lovely one. Life is full of pleasures if only one learns how to enjoy it. Beautiful, powerful one, I beg you, see the folly of the path you have chosen for yourself. Why are you killing these Danavas without any reason? They have done you no harm, yet you have made widows of their wives and their children fatherless. The Divine Mother said, Demon, I am only a witness in the world. I have no desire, and I am eternally free. I have no enmity with anyone. But when great evil rears its head, I must crush it or the worlds would be plunged in darkness. And where will the good find refuge then? I have come to restore Dharma. Demon, for you, evil master, mean to extinguish it forever. The Devas and the Trimurti preserve the worlds, and they too are born again and again to keep Dharma alive. But your king has a boon that only a woman can kill him, and who else shall that woman be but me? Your king is an enemy of Dharma, demon, and I mean to have his head. He sits upon a lofty throne, far from his proper station in life, and darkness sweeps the three realms. He abuses the boons he has. If you truly want peace, I will give him another chance. Let him abandon Devaloka and return to Patala, where he belongs, where the noble Prahlada dwells. Asiloma, who was a wise demon, turned to his comrade Vidalakya. Demon, you have heard what she says. What shall we do now? Vidalaka, who was a scholar of the Sastra, said, Our Lord Mahisha knows that he will die if he meets this Devi in battle. Yet he is so full of arrogance that he prefers death to doing what she asks, which, after all, is only just. Our king saw how Durmaka, Vaskala, Chikasura, and Tamra perished, and their legions with them. He heard how easily she slew those Danavas who have by themselves put armies to rout. Still he did not hesitate to send us to confront the terrible Devi, to send us to our deaths. We are like puppets, my friend, and the puppet master holds our lives in his hands. Mahisha has already heard the Devi's message to him 3 times. If he meant to do as she says, he would already have abandoned Devaloka and gone down into Patala, which my blood longs for. But he does not mean to strike peace with her. Asiloma, I fear our master has chosen to die, as if death were a bewitching woman in whose arms he means to lie forever. Mahisha will not be pleased to hear the same message from the Devi again. It is best we fight her and even die ourselves rather than return to him with his haughty words. Asiloma could not argue with what his friend said, so both of these demons donned their weapons and mounted their chariots and in readiness for battle. Though they were learned and refined demons, they were ferocious warriors as well. Vidalaka gave a blood-chilling roar and shot 7 arrows as swiftly as one at the goddess on her lion. Asiloma stood at a slight remove watching. He did not stand long thus, for some of the Devi's hands Moved in a blur, she annihilated Vidalakasvali in the air and then struck his arms and his head off with 3 luminous shafts of her own. Nothing else for it, Asiloma came to battle, though his heart shrank in fear at what he had seen. The wise demon said humbly to the Devi, "My master Mahisha could never tell what was true from what was pleasant, but I dare not tell him this. Why, I would rather give up my life to you, Devi. Devi, so fight." And he covered her in a cloak of arrows, humming with occult power. She cut them down and struck him with a score of shafts, so that he bled all over his body and was indeed like a kimsuka tree in bloom. He saw he would die and wanted to be done with it. Seizing up an iron mace, he sprang out of his chariot and ran at her. He too struck the lion a terrific blow on its head. The golden beast slashed out with his claws, and Asiloma's left arm hung limp from its shoulder. But roaring and braver with pain, he leapt straight up into the lion's broad shoulder and swung his god at the Devi's lovely face. But the blow never landed, for quick as a flash, she had struck off his head with her axe. Seeing their generals slain so quickly, the demon army began to flee. Growling fearfully, the lion hunted them and killed them, and a good number before the rest escaped. When Mahisha heard the news, he decided it was time to take the field himself. That demon's heart fluttered at the very thought of seeing the Devi face to face. Strangely, he did not care that she was his enemy and that she had killed so many of his bravest, most loyal asuras. No, she obsessed him night and day, and he must have her for his own. He must hear her cries as he holds her, soft as lotus petals. She must become his love mate. Nothing else would do, thought Mahisa, who had always had what he wanted. But then she may be repulsed by the sight of him as he usually was, half a black, shaggy beast with a tail and 2 horns on his head. So with his powerful Maya, he easily assumed a resplendent human form. So wearing lustrous silks and shimmering ornaments, he was as handsome as Kamadeva. The woman in his own palace felt faint to see him like that, and he set out with an endless wave of soldiers to conquer the Devi Bhagavati. When she saw him marching towards her, she raised her conch to her lips and blew a bass note on it, deep as the first sound from which time and place were made. Mahisha came on serenely. He said to the Devi, "It is sweet delight that all the world hankers after, lovely, lovely one. Delight is never found in isolation, but in the company of a lover." He stopped to stare at her, and he could hardly believe that anyone so beautiful could exist. His heart pounding, he went on, "I am your slave from this moment that my eyes have been fortunate enough to see you, for you are far, far lovelier than I had heard. Your beauty exceeds my wildest dreams. I'll look at you, Devi, your face, your neck, your breast, your waist like a sigh, your flaring hips, your thighs, your exquisite legs, your crimson feet. Yes, my Devi. My mind is made up. My life has changed forever from this moment. I mean to spend the rest of my days serving you as a slave. I will give up my enmity with Indra's people. You only have to ask it of me. I will do anything for you. Why, I think I would gladly give up my very life for your sake. Now come to me. You belong at my side. You are meant to be my queen. Come to me and let my life begin anew." But she threw back her perfect head and laughed. "Gross demon, I have not the faintest interest in pleasure, for I have eternal bliss, and what pleasure can compare with that? As for a man, the supreme Purusha is my lord. How can I want any other, let alone you, Mahisa? Seek your peace, for only peace will give you the joy you are seeking. Woman is bondage. She can only bring torment to your house, to your life. Listen to me, Asura. Take yourself down to Patala, which is your natural home, or else prepare to die. 7 times you and I have exchanged these same words. You importuning me and me telling you to fly down to Patala or die. The wise say that when even enemies exchange words 7 times, friendship is struck up between them. So, as you and I are now friends, I tell you as a friend, go down to Patala if you want to stay alive. But if it is death you are after, come fight me, and I will gladly kill you. But Mahisasura replied like a man in a dream, your body is soft as lotuses. How can I think of piercing this body with my weapons? Devi, I am Mahasura, who vanquished Hari, Shiva, and the Lokapalas. Think again before you decide to fight me. I beg you instead, be my queen, or else go back to where you came from in peace. You are beauty incarnate, the loveliest woman in creation, Devi. What fame shall I gain for myself if I kill you? What happiness? Contrary to what you say, no man on earth can be happy without a woman, and no woman without a man. The greatest joy is a perfect union between a man and a woman. For all of your beauty, I see you are lacking in wisdom. Who has put the foolish thought into your head that pleasure is not worth pursuing? Look, my lady, at how happy Vishnu is with Lakshmi, Brahma with Saraswati, Shiva with Uma, and Indra with Sachi. You and I together shall be happier than any of these. We shall be master and mistress of the universe. Devi, I think Kamadeva sees how delicate is your skin and is afraid to pierce you with even his flowery shafts of love. For the man who wants you to be his wife stands before you, and you turn your face from him. Or perhaps my enemies, the Devas, have told Kama to look askance at our love. Be that as it may, say that you will be mine now, lovely one, or you will regret it later when passion strikes your heart. You will regret it as much as Mandodari did her initial pride. Who is Mandodari? Whom did she spurn that she regretted it later? She was the daughter of Chandrasena, lord of the kingdom of Simla. When his child came of age, the king began to look for a husband for her. The Brahmanas in his court told him there was a prince called Kambugriva of Madra who would make the princess a perfect groom. But, spoiled as she was, being a king's eldest daughter and his favorite, Mandodari refused even to consider marriage. Not knowing life or the world at all, she said to her mother, "Never I will marry." I mean to be a virgin the rest of my life and take vows of sannyas. There is nothing as abject in the world as being dependent on a man, and I prefer a life of tapasya for myself. I mean to seek liberation, not bondage, and the wise all say that marriage is as an impediment to moksha. Mother, when a girl marries, she swears by sacred Agni that she will serve her husband in every way. Then in her father-in-law's house, she is a servant to her husband's mother and his brothers and sisters. All the time, she must think of her husband's happiness and not her own. Frequently, her reward is to have her husband marry another younger woman. Then, even if she is neglected, she may never turn her eyes to another man, for that is grievous sin. Finally, after a life of suffering, when her husband dies at last, his wife's lot as a widow is dreadful. Where is there any joy in marriage? Not a moment of it, if one is honest, mother, and I will never marry. Her mother told the king about his daughter's decision. He sighed and accepted it, thinking that perhaps she was indeed sincere about remaining a virgin and becoming a sannyas in time. Puberty was upon Mandodari, but she would listen to no entreaty from her mother or her Shakis, even when they described the pleasures of marriage to her in some detail. One day, the princess went into the nearby Vana with some of her Shakis. It happened that day that King Virasena of Kosala came hunting in that very forest. Virasena saw the dark and lissome Mandodari from a way off. The handsome young king brought his chariot near and asked one of the Shaktis, "Who is your beautiful friend? Tell me who her father is, for I mean to ask him for her hand." Seeing how splendid he was, the Shaki asked shyly, "Tell us, who are you first, stranger? What are you doing here in the Shimla kingdom?" Virasena said, "I'm king of the northern kingdom of Kosala. I have been out hunting, and I think I've lost my way. But perhaps fate brought me here just to find your friend. She has captured my heart." Hope for her mistress surged in the Shaki, for Virasena was irresistible. Moreover, she saw he had an open, honest face. She said, "My lotus-eyed princess is Mandodari, the daughter of King Chandrasena of this kingdom. She lives yonder in her father's palace." Virasena stood trembling. His eyes had never for a moment left Mandodari, who had not so much as looked at him yet. The young king said to the Shaki, "I see you are a very most intelligent girl. Go tell your princess Mandodari who I am, and tell her I beg her to marry me at once by Gandharva Vivha, so we need waste no time asking her father or mother. I have never felt like this about any woman. I can't wait for her to be mine. Tell her I have no other wife and never shall, if she will be my queen. If she wants to ask her father first, I will wait." And he stood fairly devouring the princess with his eyes. The Shaki, who was Mandodari's favorite girl, took the king's message to the princess. And the sprightly girl added her own wisdom. "Women find heaven for themselves only by serving their husbands. Every great rishi has said so. And then he is so handsome, you will be lucky to have him in your bed." But Mandodari hardly looked at Virasena, but cried, "Tell the shameless man to stop staring at me with his lustful eyes. Tell him I'm a sannyasin and to go away." Tears in her eyes, the Shaki cried, "You are spurning fate that brings you such a dashing husband, and he seems so honest as well. Love is powerful, Mandodari. It can strike you down at any time. I beg you, take this king to be your husband before fate grows annoyed with you." But the princess would not listen. "Let fate do as it likes, but for now I don't mean to marry. Tell the king to leave us alone." The Shaki came sadly to Virasena and said, "It seems my mistress isn't desired to have a handsome husband. Forgive her if you can, and be on your way, noble king." And she showed him the way home. Broken-hearted, Virasena took his army and made his way back to Kosala and his capital Ayodhya. His heart burned, for he felt fate had cheated him by showing him the alluring Mandodari, who made him feel what no other woman ever had, and then having her spurn him. And the dreadful Asura, Mahisa, said this to the resplendent Devi. Chapter 24. And so Vedavyasa continued the story. Mahasura went on to the Devi, and the Devi listened to him with no emotions on her face. Mandodari had a sister called Indumati, a pretty girl, just 2 years younger than the elder princess. Soon Indumati also came of age, and her father arranged a fine swayambara for her, to which all the eligible princes and kings of India were invited. Indumati, who was altogether a more sensible girl than her sister, quickly chose a fine-looking young Kshatriya who touched her heart to be her husband. But that was not all that happened at that Swayamvara. By cunning fate, Mandodari too was struck by love's subtle lightning. She saw the lord of Madra, a slim, dark youth with lank hair and a loose limb. And it seemed Kama chose that moment to strike her with all his 5 floral shafts of love. She was pierced. She was helpless. She was raging with love for this young king, whose name was Charudisna, who had a nose much too large for his face and rather shifty eyes. Manodari was not a princess to wait for what she wanted. In the very sabha, she strode up to her father and announced, "I have lost my heart to the king of Madra. Let us also be married right away." Charudisna did not have a savory reputation, but Mandodari was as adamant about marrying him immediately as she had been before about never marrying at all. Her poor father, Chandrasena, was quite helpless, and the king seemed perfectly willing to have the elusive Mandodari for his wife, especially since she was truly beautiful, while her sister, Indumati, could only be described as pretty. So both sisters were given way in marriage to different princes who, when the ceremonies and rituals were concluded, took their brides back to their kingdoms. Mandodari was blissful in her husband's home for the first month after she was married. He was an expert lover, and she was too innocent to wonder how this was so, but imagined he was a virgin like herself when they married. As was the custom, Mandodari's father had sent some of her Shakis with his daughter to be her companions in her new home in Madra. It was the same bright Saki who had urged her mistress to marry the king Virasida from Ayodhya in the forest, who came to the young queen's room one day with her face dark. "What is the matter? You look as if you had seen a ghost." "I would rather not tell, mistress," replied the girl. But Mandodari, so used to having her way in everything, would not let her be until she told her what it was that had upset her. At last the Shaki, who had been the queen's playmate since they were children, blurted, "I saw your husband just now in the passage when I was on my way to you, and so, well, he had that new young maid, Shalini, with him. What are you trying to say?" "You know the small table that rests against the wall at the far end of the passage in the dark corner? Well, she was on the table, her back against the wall, and she had her legs draped around your husband's shoulders while he stood before her and thrust at her as if for his very life." Mandodari gasped. She turned red. The next day, Chitra was sent back to Simhala. In the night, the queen asked her husband about what her Shaki had said, and he laughed, and saying that the girl had tried to seduce him a week ago, but he had refused her advances, and she was angry. She had made up this lie. Chitra was forgotten, and Mandora spent another contented month with her husband. But truth will out, and one evening, at the time of her prayers, when she was usually in the puja chamber, Mandodari happened to come into her bedroom to fetch some incense she had left beside her bed. She walked into the room and stood rooted at the door, her world crumbling around her, for there on her very bed lay her husband, quite naked on his back, and in the raw herself, astride him, so that her head was at his groin and his face buried in hers, was yet another maidservant, one of her very own Shakis. Mandodari ran sobbing from the room, and before the idols in her room of worship, she vowed she would never lie with her husband again, nor even speak to him. but would pursue a spiritual life once more, avidly seek moksha. Now that rash princess remembered how haughtily she had spurned Virasena, how she had indeed broken his heart without a thought. Now she knew the same anguish that noble prince had felt when she callously went away from him. She thought of taking her own life, for she was in torment, that proud woman. But then the sin of taking one's own life clings to one for many lives. She could not very well go back to her father's house. She would be the laughing stock ever after. Caught by fate like a rat in a trap, Mandodari, bitterly rude, having refused the king of Kosala. Every night she saw Virasena's gentle face before her eyes. He haunted her dreams. But of course it was now too late for her, and so she must endure the rest of her life as best she could in misery and prayer. Devi, like Virasena, I too lay my love at your feet. Don't spurn me, lovely one, and then live to regret it in some day when you find yourself shackled to a man who does not love you and betrays you at his whim. Come away with me. We were meant to be together. Take me for your husband, and we shall rule the world side by side. But she was unmoved. With a stranger's smile, she said, Go down into Patala, or prepare to fight me. I see that you are a greater fool than I thought, that you dare compare me with Mandodari. Do you even know who I am? I am the mother of the heavens and earth. I am the formless Parashakti. You see me like this because I have come to establish Dharma in the worlds, the Dharma that you seek to destroy, demon. I have come to kill you, Mahisa, you son of a buffalo. Let us have done with words. Come, fight me now. She spoke with scorn sharper than arrows, and at last it dawned on Maheswara, Lord of the world, that she had indeed come to kill him and not to make love. His chest heaved and his eyes burned scarlet when he thought of her arrogance and how she spurned him again and again, calling him a buffalo's son. That dreadful Asura's breath turned to fire when he thought of how many of his soldiers she had slain. Before her eyes, he was half a great beast again, big as a hill, with horns long as trees, his body covered in black fur, his long tail flicking from side to side. He stood before the Devi, pawing the earth and bellowing from time to time, awesome Maheswara, conqueror of the Devas. But she only laughed to see him like that, as if he was the most comical creature imaginable. In fury, Mahisa covered her with 1,000 searing arrows, but she swept them aside with thought-like volleys of her own. Bellowing louder than ever, the demon shot incendiary astras of dire sorcery at her, but she cut them down contemptuously as well and broke the bow in his hand. Seeing his lord held up by the blazing Devi, Duradara came flying into battle. He struck the goddess with poison-tipped shafts that stung like a serpent, plunging brief agony through her blood. With a roar to match Mahisa's bellowing, she struck Duradana with an explosive astra, blowing him to crimson shreds. Three-eyed, horrific Trinetra shot 7 arrows at her, and they found their mark on her perfect body, but she drew them out with the magic spell and cast her Trishul at the demon, piercing him through all 3 eyes, killing him at once. Great wild Andaka flew blindly into the battle and smote the goddess's lion in the head with an iron club. But the beast reared on its hind legs and brought that Danava down on his back. The lion tore open his chest with his claws like whale hooks and began to feed on his heart. Mahisa still kept up his archery, and the Devi contained his fire. Then he pierced her with 2 elliptical arrows, and she cast a gada heavy as a mountain at him. The club struck Mahissa squarely in the chest and felled him. When he rose again, the Asura charged his beautiful adversary with his mace in his hand. The Devi's lion loomed in the Danava's path, and Mahisa fetched the beast a stupendous blow. The lion staggered briefly, then leapt at the demon and raked his chest with claws of iron. Blood flowed down Mahisa's black chest in 4 streams, and the lion still rushed at him again and again, talons flying. Suddenly, with Maya, Mahisa turned himself into an enormous lion as well, and the 2 beasts fought, tooth and nail, their roars shaking the holy ground upon which they stood, their blood flowing free under the sun. Slowly the Asura began to prevail over the Devi's beast. In rage, she struck Mahisa with 2 weapons like serpents, so that his head turned blue and he had to abandon his feline's form. In a flash, the demon had become an immense bull elephant. His trumpeting shook the sky to the foundations, and the juice of must flowed copiously from his temples, for he was maddened by the nearness of the Devi and by battle too. Thus Behemoth plucked the peaks off nearby mountains, and cast them as his lovely enemy, like thunder and lightning. But she was impenetrable. She smashed those crags into dust. Suddenly the Devi's lion sprang into the demon elephant's head and mauled him with claws longer than Garuda's talons. In a fetch, the elephant vanished, and a great and terrible bird appeared in its place. Its feathers were streaks of lightning. Its beak was a scimitar. Its talons were daggers, and it flew at the Devi and her beast with a shrill cry. But she hewed off one of its wings, and with her battle axe, and in a blink, Mahisa was a streaming bull buffalo again, and charged the Devi with lowered head, horns that seemed as long as time. Mahisa the buffalo tore up vast hills by the roots and hurled them at the Devi, but she smashed them with stunning volleys from her bows. She still swilled thirstily from her flagon of wine, and her clear and terrible laughter rang out that endless battlefield, and Mahisa thought he would go mad just listening to her. Then he also threw back his horned head and bellowed with laughter. He roared at her, "Prepare to die now, lovely one. Let Yama enjoy your youth and beauty. I see now that you are mad, that you came to kill me. Mahisa, the Lord of the world, I will have your head first, and then the heads of the Devas, cowards who sent you here. Stand and fight, woman. I will drink your blood today." She roared back, "I mean to end the Deva's fear today. I will part your foolish head from your body. Ah, a little more wine for me, then the earth shall drink your blood." She drank again deeply from the golden cup, and her eyes rolled now. Then she set her beast at Mahisa, and for the first time she became the aggressor. She flew at the Asura. The sky was full of divine voices crying encouragement to the Devi. Bright petals rained all around the goddess, and all the field was steeped in the scents of heaven. Jaya, they called to her, the Rishis, the Devas, the Kanars, the Siddhas, Apsaras, and the other races that suffered under Mahisha's tyranny. Meanwhile, Mahisa changed form swifter than time, becoming one dreadful creature after another, and attacked the Devi with weapons, claws, talons, beaks, fists, and his horns and hoofs. Once he struck her squarely through her dark breast with a twin-headed arrow like 2 serpents. Her eyes turned the color of setting sun, and She cast her trishul like lightning at the demon. The trident struck the asura through his chest, drawing 3 fountains of blood from him as he fell unconscious. But he was up in a moment and rushing at the Devi as a buffalo again. He kicked her in the face with flying hoofs, and she almost fell off her lion's back. Seizing his advantage, he gored her and kicked her repeatedly until she was bathed in her own blood. Then her eyes glistened like cold blue stars. A spinning chakra, which was the inner Shakti of the Sudarsana, appeared over one of her fingers, flaring like a wheel of the sun. She held it aloft so that the demon had to shut his eyes. In a final voice, she said to him, "Look, demon, this is your death I have at my finger." She flicked her wrist forward, and the blinding chakra flashed at Mahisa. The roar, which erupted from the dark belly, was cut short in his throat. The chakra struck his head from his neck in a blast of blood which covered all that battlefield red as the Kimsukas in spring. Like a mountain streaming froth thing from a cleft in the rocks, Mahesura's blood gushed from his severed throat, bubbling and warm. His huge body swayed for a moment, its hands still raised to seize the Devi's throat. Then it fell with a report that shook the 3 worlds, and bright Nagas with jewels in their heads came slithering up from Patala to see whether time was ending. When great Mahesura fell, panic seized the demons, and that army of thousands fled howling in every direction. The Devi's golden lion chased them and gorged himself on demon flesh. Glowing now that her task was accomplished, the goddess took herself off the field of war and waited for the Devas in an auspicious grove of trees. The Devas appeared there, fell at their feet, and began to eulogize the triumphant Devi. "Oh, it is by your power that Brahma creates, Vishnu preserves, and Shiva destroys the universe. The Trimurti are helpless without you, Devi, cause of all causes. Only cunning Puranikas seduce foolish men away from your feet to worship Vishnu and Shiva. They are nothing without you, Devi. You are the primal power from which Hari and Hara were born. Mother, we thank you. You have freed us from the terrible Mahesura. The worlds are liberated from evil's yoke. We, the Devas, breathe in peace once more." The Devi raised her hand over them in blessing and said, "Is there anything else I can do for you, Devas?" They replied, "Devi, all our purposes were achieved when you killed Mahisa. Let all the worlds worship you from now. Let your fame be like the very air that men breathe." She smiled at them radiantly and then vanished before their eyes. Compassion and goodness welled naturally once more in men's heart and in the hearts of all the created. Indra resumed his throne in heaven, and his Lokpala were again the lords of the elements and of time. On Mahisha's earthly throne, the Devas set Shatrugana, the king of Ayodhya, of the house of Ishvaku. Dharma returned to the 3 worlds. The clouds gathered again in season, and fragrant rains fell. The world was blessed with a springtime of plenitude, and her fields were rich with rice and wheat, her trees festive with flowers and fruits. Cows yielded sweet milk now, while their udders had shriveled and dried during the years of Mahesura's tyranny. The forests were full of rapturous bird songs, and the subtle arteries of the earth surged in undiluted joy, that the gods were in their heaven and all was well above and below. The rivers and streams of the earth turned sparkling and crystalline, while their very waters seemed to sing of the world's deliverance from evil. Charmed lakes were heavy with brilliant lotuses. These mystic flowers had never bloomed when Mahisa lived. And all men lived in Dharma, in harmony with the world and themselves and fulfilling their natural tasks. Most of all, the godlessness that had raised its head darkly in men's heart vanished, as if it had been a nightmare from which humankind had now awakened. The Vedas were sung, the Shastras studied, and fires of yagyas lit homes and ashrams. Worship was the way once more, and it rendered life ambrosial. It was again a time when it was more natural and easier to love your fellow man than to hate him. There were no more wars in the world. Men were honest and satisfied with what they had. Envy and covetousness left their hearts as if they had never dwelt there at all. Women were chaste and their husbands faithful. Children revered their parents, and the tradition of guru and shishya was stronger than ever. The brahmanas of the world were exemplary priests, kshatras were just rulers, the vaishyas excellent tradesmen, and the sudras immaculate servants and artists. No man exploited or abused his fellow, and fine harmony dwelt in all things. The rule of heaven was in the world, and peace and goodness dwelt in men's heart. More than anything else, after Maheswara's death, the worship of the Devi Bhagavati was established on earth. Her temples were everywhere, and her grace. Sickness of spirit and body left the world. Men lived fruitful lives and died only in the fullness of time, when they had archived all they had been born for, achieved all they had been born for. It was a blessed time, and the earth bloomed, and there was harmony in Swarga, Bhumi, and Patala below, by the blessings of the Devi. So Veda Vyasa told King Janamejaya, Jai Mahamaya ki jai, Vishveshwari Mata ki jai, Bole Baba ki jai.